Monster Hunter Wilds is here, and hey, look at that, it has a photo mode. Let's take a look at this rather tricky photo mode and see what we can learn from it. My name is Mir, and let's get started, shall we? To access the photo mode, go ahead and bring up your menu, and then go down to the System tab here at the end, and you'll see photo mode right there. So the first thing I want to talk about is the camera. So left stick is to move around, right stick is to move the camera, which is all fine and well. But the first issue and the first reason why I say this is a little tricky is when you go into the photo mode, it doesn't pause the scene and you can move the camera around. Instead, you have to pause the entire game. So if I hit R3 here, it pauses the game so I can line up my shot, but I can't move my camera around. So I'm hitting my right analog stick and yeah, I can't move this. So this is a bit tricky to work with compared to other photo modes. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pause the game right here, and let's talk about this little square grid line. So as you can see here, the square in the middle doesn't line up with a traditional rule of thirds grid line that you're going to see in other games or even cameras, but that's okay. It's just I wanted to show you this as like a visual representation of how that square is. Next, let's talk about the zoom controls at the bottom. So the slider here is all the way to the left, meaning I'm in the wide angle section, and this introduces your wide angle distortion, where your foreground and your background, they look like they're spread apart, they look like they're further away from each other. Moving the slider all the way to the right, this is your telephoto, which introduces your telephoto compression, where your foreground and your background, they're compressed, they look like they're right next to each other. So let's talk about the controls on the top right of the screen. So X is to take your photo, you can exit the photo mode. If you press the sub menu, you can hide the UI, or you can go to your photo album. L1 brings you to your edit menu, which we'll get to in just a minute. And if you go to switch view mode, you can actually go from this first person point of view, press square, and now you can actually introduce your character into the screen. Push square again, and you'll go back to a first person view. Using the D-pad, if you use left and right, you can pan the camera left and right. And if you do up or down, you can dolly the camera up or down. So the name of the game for this photo mode is timing. So as you can see, I'm kind of creeping around in the photo mode. Let me zoom in a little bit. And to get the shots, if I pause the game, I can't move the camera around like I mentioned earlier. So what I'd have to do is just, let's say I want to take a picture of this monster. I can get closer. I'd basically have to wait for it to aggro. I'm going to keep moving around until it doesn't move and then pause at the right time. So going back to what I had mentioned earlier is that you can't move the camera after you pause the game. So you have to wait for the moment, especially if it's a monster attacking you. You have to wait for that moment and then pause it right at the right time. If you don't get it, you have to unpause and then just wait for the next move. Once you find a shot that you think will work, go ahead and hit L1 and you'll bring up the edit menu. And here you have camera view, camera rotation, and then depth of field, which go ahead and turn that on. And then you'll get depth of focus and focal ratio. So this first setting is your camera view. So let's say you've select your zoom and you think, okay, this wide angle looks great, but hey, maybe I'm a little too zoomed out. You can actually select camera view and then maybe zoom in a little bit more. Now just keep in mind that it's paused and you can't move the camera left, right, up or down, but you can adjust the zoom in here if you want, just some minor adjustments. Now here's the second reason why I think this is a bit tricky. So right now I have this slider on camera view, and if I decide, okay, I want it right here, so if I try to move down to camera rotation, it won't let me, and if I push circle just to kind of back out, it resets. So what you would have to do per setting is adjust it and then push, in my case, push X to confirm that that's what you want, and then you can move around. It's not a huge deal, but it is just something to note because it is something quite different than most other photo modes. Next is your camera rotation, and this is pretty self-explanatory. You can rotate the image in either direction, and then if you wanted to, you can actually make a portrait image. So moving on to the depth of field, go ahead and turn it on. And let's start with the depth of focus. If we select this and start moving the slider, you'll notice that nothing's actually happening. Well, the reason why, the focal ratio is what needs to be turned on. So go ahead and select that and start moving it. And the more you move it to the right, the blurrier it gets. This blur in photography is known as bokeh. What I would recommend is keep the focal ratio at 10 and move the depth of focus to adjust where you want the focus to be. So if you move it to the left, it actually focuses closer to you. And then of course, if you go to the right, it'll focus further away into the background. Now, when you're in edit menu, you'll notice that there's a camera icon up at the top, and you have L1 and R1 to switch between different tabs. Well, to access other tabs, go back, unpause the game, and then go to switch view mode. That way it shows your character on screen. And the reason why you want to do that is because when you go back to the edit menu, the other tabs that are here are for your character, are for different poses. Something fun that you can do is that if you go to gestures and, like, let's say we go to this stop one, we go back, you can control the camera, but also you can run around and your character still does the gesture. So you can kind of have a lot of fun trying to take pictures with this. Now, what you're seeing on screen is one of the shots that I took while testing out the photo mode, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this took about an hour to get this shot, because the limited camera movement when pausing the game, with no camera movement when pausing the game, I had to wait for the exact timing and framing for this shot to look cool. So yeah, bit of a tricky photo mode, but still, I'm sure you guys are going to have fun with it. If you found this video helpful, please like this video and check out this playlist of other photo modes I looked at in other games. That's going to be it for me today, and I'll see you next time.